Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I'm your host, Danielle Richardson. And again, if you're enjoying these videos and enjoying listening to this podcast, please do subscribe, as that's the best way to support the podcast and be able to get the word out there, as well as get to hear more about individuals around the world. And today I'm speaking with Allison Eide, and I came across her video that she posted of her when she was, I believe, 12. And she was saying in the video clip she created that she was going through an anxiety season and she had this big panic attack before she walked on stage. And she got to sing the song Be Born in Me, which is one of my favorite songs. It's a very vulnerable song. It was written from the perspective of like Mary, the mother of Jesus, being open to the Lord and saying, whatever you want to do with me, do. But it's a very vulnerable song and kind of goes back to humans as well, and specifically believers who are like, Lord, use my suffering for your glory. And she was saying in this video, I just had a panic attack. She walks out to do this performance that she's always was wanting to do. And you can just hear the vulnerability in her voice, not only through what she'd just gone through, but through the lyrics of the song. And I was so struck by this video, and I was like, who the heck is this person? I was like, this is such a cool story. And so then I found her Instagram, and then I found out that she's about to release her first album, Love Who I Am, which is coming out, I think, March 29th.
Yes.
And I was like, wow. And she's released a couple singles before that. She's on Spotify, which you can find, but she's actually starting her very first own personal tour the end of this month. And she has a heart to talk about mental illness, mental struggles, and how that collaborates with her faith. And I think that's just awesome. So, Allison, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I'm honored, and I didn't actually know that was the video that you happened upon like on Instagram. That was
Yeah.
that was like one of my own like personal core memories of the Lord shifting something internally in my heart. So I'm like people who encounter that video and it stands out to them, I'm like, I don't know, it's just validating. So that's super cool.
Well, it's huge because at the end there's this quote. I think you put it from C.S. Lewis that says that God's presence is not always felt. It's just there with you. And I know for me, as someone who has, I'm diagnosed with anxiety and I have OCD, I have all these other things that cause life to be hard. I, that's so true because I don't feel God's presence very often. I wouldn't say like I have this spiritual experience of like, a lot of times I'm afraid and a lot of times I'm worried. And so it's like when I want to recognize God's presence, I actually have to stop and just tell myself, okay, God is here. God is with me. It doesn't feel like it at all, but I know
Mhm.
it's true because of what he said in his word. And I have to hold on to that. I can't rely on a feeling. And so, I wanted to ask you because seeing that video and seeing how young you started experiencing this stuff, when when was like the first time you experienced a panic attack or you realized, I really struggle with, anxiety. When did that kind of first start for you?
It's a great question. Um, the earliest memory I have probably of anxiety and OCD. I was also diagnosed with that when I was like 21, but it made my whole life make sense.
Yeah.
Uh, at 10 years old, I remember having a panic attack in many tears and breathing really hard. I was in my mom's arms on like the stairs up near my bedroom, and she was holding me, and I kept having this intrusive thought of like, if I don't end my life the next day, my brother will never love me. And it was this OCD, like irrational thought, but it felt so real. And I
Mm.
didn't want my life then. It was just this, I have to live with my brother never loving me. And um, usually I don't share that much detail of the story, but I want to right now because that is a thought a 10-year-old had. And I remember sitting there and my mom was like, this isn't real. Like you were safe, you were good, your brother does love you. And I kept going, like, I know it's not real, but it feels so real, and I can't tell the difference. Um, and I would have growing up, middle school, high school, college, like those extreme intrusive thoughts dozens of times during the day. And it's so strange how sometimes when you're young, you can't identify why it's happening, but it is happening. And so, thankfully, my mom's a therapist, so she knows and knew how to navigate some of that stuff. But that was my earliest distinct memory of anxiety.
Wow. No, one thing that was hard for me was I I started when I was young too, same as you. I don't remember how old I was, but I remember just every time I felt angry at somebody, I would get terrified that I was going to murder them. It was
Mm,
the weirdest thing. It was like I felt like I was destined to do so because I felt upset. And
yes,
then I was terrified of upset. Like I hated that feeling. I was like, I will be anything but angry. Like I just wanted to shut myself out and be like, please don't, no one come near me because I'm a dangerous person. I was just so scared. And
fully understand. Yeah.
my parents didn't understand it at the time. It's such a gift that you had a mom that was a therapist. But as I got older and ended up going into therapy, she was like, yeah, you actually have harm OCD. And I was like, what's that? She's like, well, you have these thoughts about harming yourself or other people. They just come in and you feel so real. And it was freeing to know, but it's very embarrassing to tell people. Like, I think I've told I would tell a few friends, and some of them, it was like, what? Because it
Yeah.
sounds so, you know.
Like, and there's a misunderstanding, hard to understood because it's strange and it doesn't make sense. And it's extreme. And I think extreme things can seem scary on the outside, but um, I learned like when I first started therapy for OCD, it was like these thoughts are not me. They come in
Right.
the brain, but they're not coming from core Allison. Like that helps me feel like I could step outside of the intrusive thoughts.
How long do you think it was before you felt some relief from the pressure that you were experiencing?
I would say probably my junior or senior year of college. That's when I finally, well, I understood I had OCD. That helped a ton. And then started like counseling or therapy a little bit, and it gave me some tools to like navigate when the intrusive thoughts come. Um, but it was strange growing up because I knew I had anxiety, but it was an oddball version of it, and no one truly knew. They'd give advice, but it wouldn't usually help because it was just a weird branch of anxiety.
Hmm.
And I would feel safest and um, most grounded when I was on stage or when I was on the basketball court. So these performance settings, I felt like I was like safe from my mind attacking me, and then behind the scenes, it was just super debilitating, which is ironic because like usually the performance things are what causes anxiety, but it was flipped for me. Um, yeah, so that's kind of when that's the timeline of what it felt like.
So when you were talking about debilitating, because you're talking about starting when you're 10 all the way to college, it's a really long time. Um, what if we were to kind of just step into a day of your life, whether it be when you were playing basketball? It was for the NCAA, right? I'm saying that right?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Um, whether it was the basketball or the singing, what was a day like for you? Like you would wake up and what
Hmm.
was it like to be you during that time?
I would say I'd wake up at probably 4:30 a.m. because if it had to be that time, no later, no earlier. OCD. I'd get up, I would like literally shower, but I would never use conditioner, only shampoo. OCD trait there. I would, well, first I would go work out for like 2 hours because I struggled with an eating disorder too and wanted to like make sure I wasn't getting fat or gaining weight because that was bad in my mind. And then I'd shower and have a ritual and how I did that. I would say I would avoid a lot of places on campus. I would just feel a dread constantly and always want to hide in corners and stuff, like not be seen. Um, but when I would get to like sing or lead worship, um, or like if I had rehearsal that night or something, or if I had practice, I would go and feel a little more free. And I would just be like in my element, in my zone. So those were kind of the relief of the day. Otherwise, I would say if I was by myself and like able to just like write songs or go on a walk by myself and like listen to music, it was just moments I could hide. So processing out loud right now. I would say I love to hide and be unseen. And then if I was in a state of performance or whatever, like I would also feel safe. But any of the in-betweens
Yeah.
was anxiety.
So if you exercised for 2 hours, did you enjoy exercising or did you find it like, I must do this, therefore I do it, but you didn't enjoy it?
Ooh, it was both, I'd say. By nature, I'm a very driven person and very passionate. And so getting up to work out, um, it was this mix of like, I want to do this and I have to do this. Um, so I would say I would just get very obsessive over what I was doing working out, like trying to beat my score or PR or something. Like it was, I'd say mostly rooted out of fear in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I loved pushing myself. So both and.
Yeah. And when it came to food, were you like were did you have like were you the type of person that would count calories or was it like I'll eat? Because I've known people who struggle with eating disorder, and some of my friends would, especially when they were teenagers, they would just restrict very, very little food, and they would like all the foods they found comfort in as a kid, they would say, no, it's too many calories in that. I can't even eat one of those things, not a chip. I can't eat that. Can't have a cookie, no. And then for other people, it was they would binge. So they would like restrict themselves for a certain amount of time and they would purge either by throwing up or for some of them it was exercising for hours on end to get rid of everything. And then they would go on a fast again and then they binge again and then they'd purge again. And that's how they kind of just kept going. So they would keep losing weight. For you, how was which, which way did you go with the eating disorder?
I love that you named all of those different ways because I think an eating disorder is such an umbrella. There's so many different ways it manifests. I would say if someone is thinking a lot about what they're eating and how they're eating, and that's all that comes to their mind every day, all the time, that's usually a sign of disordered eating. So I just like that you mentioned that. For me, it was a pretty uh disorganized version where I would go from tons of restriction on types of foods and only eat certain things. And then other times it would be like starve myself and then binge and then feel guilty and then work out for 3 hours as a punishment. And demonizing a lot of foods, like where I was like, if I were to eat it, I would like have panic because I was about to gain weight and then like, or that's what they told me. Um, so it was interesting though. I didn't know any of this was even a sign of losing or an eating disorder. I just thought I was making healthier choices or being more disciplined in my eating, like all those cover-up terms. I remember, so I played 2 years of basketball at one university, then I transferred to another. The first one, I had a really unhealthy experience in their sports program. I remember the coach one time telling us like the ideal body a girl basketball player should have. And I wanted to please the coach, so I would like in my determined self do whatever it takes to get
Wow.
that body or that athleticism. Naturally, my body wasn't going to even fit that ideal, so I would fail at it all the time and just be in this insatiable cycle of trying to fix myself. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how it showed up in my own world. Very messy, very. complex.
So when you transferred to the other college, is that when did it, when you discovered these things, was it going into therapy when you were in college, or was this after?
Uh, like when did I recognize this was an eating disorder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't recognize it being an eating disorder until after college. So, when I transferred schools and played for the second university, it was a night and day difference, like in the sports program where it was healthy leadership. They were so encouraging.
Hmm.
I being able to play the best basketball I had, like it was really a um positive experience. But I was still eating pretty restrictively and had anxiety surrounding food. And then literally probably just about a year ago is when I learned all of this is an eating disorder. I just wasn't technically like anorexic or um I wasn't like gaining a ton of weight or anything either from binging. So there were these explicit signs. But when I went to therapy and really learned about the eating disorder thing, I was like, I feel validated. And I got a health coach who really helped me understand how to fuel myself as an athlete. And as of today, like the eating disorder is nearly almost healed. Like it's
Wow.
really a blessing. So there's a means to an end in healing. At least I'm learning.
Well, I was gonna ask you, like, during this really long period, because you're right, you're living it, so you're kind of surviving, and it doesn't always hit you that you're in this survival mode. You just,
Mm,
that's how you live, so you're like, this is life, but you're miserable or really sad, but you're like, keep going, and you just figure there's no way out until you finally realize, well, actually, you can renew the mind and you can think differently about things, which changes everything. It's, your perspective. When you were going through this, you know, what was your relationship with the Lord like? Because I know OCD manifests itself for me, like I had it, especially when I was young. I think I'd go through patches of it, but it was like spiritual OCD where it was like I would really be worried God was mad at me for like different things, and then I'd make a
mhm,
promise to God, a really stupid promise to be like, I'm sorry, I won't do this. And then I would do it, of course, because it was a stupid promise. And then I would feel terrible and do it again. And then I would feel like I'd have to say sorry a certain amount of times. And
mhm,
it was like every time I thought about God, people would say he loves you. He's a loving father. Like, read his word. He cares about you. I'd be like, I don't feel that way at all. Like, I just feel like he's so mad at me all the time, that he's um requires so much, that there's so much to do. I'm exhausted all the time. And and the freedom that people would talk about that would come from salvation. I was
yeah,
like, I'm not experiencing this. I'm not having any feelings. I'm not having any highs, Christian highs. I'm not experiencing like whatever these people are talking about where there's this joy in the Lord. I was like, what the heck is that? Because I really want it, but I don't have it at all. So I thought something was wrong with me. But I also thought for years, it wasn't until after college, similar to you, like during the end of college into adulthood, that I was like, okay, this is actually a me thing. Something, my perspective is wrong based on my life, based on the experiences I've had. But like for a long time, God was not a refuge. He was very much like another thing to do. Read the Bible for a certain amount of time. How long did I pray? All this stuff. And it was mixed with a genuine desire. That's like how broken we are, right? It's like there's like this real desire to like connect with God, but at the same time, we're so broken that the way we're connecting is so frazzled and just all over the place. So, like for you, what was that like with your walk with the Lord? Did you find him to be a source of encouragement when you were going through all this, or were you struggling? Because I know you mentioned that
mhm.
going into worship was encouraging for you.
Yeah. Okay. You are so good at articulating things. I very much relate with watching people like from my lens, they're having these beautiful, deeply felt connections with the Lord.
Yeah.
What is wrong with me that I like flatlined? Like, am I doing something wrong? Is this all fake? And then I start getting intellectual about it. And and then I spiral, and it's just a mess. But um, I was trying to think of like, what's the one thing that I could identify what it was like to follow the Lord when I was struggling. And what I kind of am coming to right now is I think I knew how to connect with the knowledge of who God was, and I had heart for him to learn about him, but I wasn't connected with myself to him. And what
Yeah.
I mean with
Hmm.
that, like we're always taught about the Holy Spirit and like God is like his presence, his spirit, and we're to connect with that. But I'm like, as image bearers, as sons and daughters that are created by him, like we have our own spirit too. And it's our own spirit that is to connect to the Holy Spirit. But we aren't even taught to even dwell on who are we and like who did God create us to be. Um,
Hmm.
And it's not even this like self-centered, like, oh, my eyes are on me and not God. It's I am the temple of the Holy Spirit. And if I'm not connected with this house that he dwells in, if I'm not aware of what's happening inside, like, then no wonder I feel disconnected from him.
Hmm.
I remember a mentor of mine in 2020, so I was a sophomore in college. I was just kind of learning about this concept of like, what is my own spirit saying? And what is the Holy Spirit? How is he interacting with it? Um, and that I think when I was able to identify that, I suddenly started to understand what true connection looks like. I read this book called Gentle and Lowly by Dan Ortley. I should know.
Yeah.
This is my life. It talks about the heart of Jesus towards sinners and sufferers. And for the first time ever, I think I learned how to allow Jesus close to my mess and close to my spirit, which was a mess.
Hmm.
Um, Once I allowed him to come close to that, of which his whole heart, his design, his gut, like is a magnet to our mess. And I hate how sometimes that's confusing in the church, or we think we have to put ourselves together, then Jesus draws near. But it's like, no, he's like drawn to our deepest, most messy self. Um,
Hmm.
but when I allowed him close to my mess, that's when I really started to recognize how close a connection could be with him. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the biggest thing was I knew God loved me my whole life, and I was told that. I like Christian home, church, everything. But I didn't know how to love me. And that is a fair thing to figure out because we are creations of the Lord and we are made to be loved. And so it actually honors the Lord when we can learn how to connect with ourselves. So yeah,
I want you to elaborate on that because I think some believers would be like, "Ooh, no, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like a pop song somewhere." It's interesting because your album's coming out. It's called "Love Who I Am," and at first glance, I think sort of the I don't know what to call it. Maybe the more pharisaical or fearful side of us is like, "Oh my gosh, no way. That sounds bad. That sounds like some sort of mantra somewhere." And then you don't think through it and you're just like boom. But I think what's really interesting from what you said is you're like, but you have to accept, if I'm understanding this right, and help me if I'm not, you need to accept where you're at and see the weaknesses you have. Obviously you want to grow, you want to become more like Christ, but you're realizing that this is where the Lord has you right now and you're embracing that completely, and you're like, I'm going to continue growing in him and loving the fact that he's made me as I am. If I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, because I think a lot of people are afraid that when you say something like love who I am, that means you're loving your sin too. And then people are like, ooh, no.
like you're right. Like that's the whole, you're just like, accepting yourself, but not, yeah, like it's heresy. Like it's like, that's what the devil wants you to. It's funny. Excuse me. I released a single last fall called Liar Truth Is, which is like
Yeah.
upbeat, very confident type song, I'd say, very sassy. And it got so much hate on the internet. And people kept saying this is theologically blasphemy. This is what the devil wants us to think, where we're focusing on self and everything. And it was just fascinating to watch how um I think that song rubbed against the Pharisaical approach to Christianity. Because there is an imperfection about the song. It is saying like I know my worth, but it's because of who it's coming from. Um, and so I think it causes tension. I think the topic does cause tension. But something that came to mind as you were talking was when I look at like the life of Jesus in the Gospels, the way he would go and heal people and encounter the broken. Oftentimes when people came to him, and he came to them, the first thing like he would do in conversation, or the first actionable thing he would do is heal something physical with them. And that draws the attention to themselves and their ailment and what they need. But
Mm.
I think to me, that makes me think focusing on, or like our eyes being on ourselves in the moment, like isn't the sinful part because it actually draws us to the one who healed us. But there must be value in healing self, connecting with self. I don't know. I'm totally processing out loud, but Jesus would choose to heal the person's, and like, I don't know how to say this, but he would pay attention to something about them.
Yeah.
And he, so basically that just tells me there's something valuable about ourselves and who we are as his creation. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, because I've even and I've heard some of your lyrics, like I think your song Light Within Me, or forgive me if I'm
right
messing it
inside
up.
you. Yeah.
Light Inside You, yeah. Where it's like you talk about the goodness in you, and at first I was like, wait, I thought man isn't good. But then as the song continued on, it was like you were saying good in the sense that Christ has created me and that I've been made in his image and that the work he is doing is good because Christ sees us, he sees us as himself almost, because he's died for us. So he doesn't see, when we are saved, he doesn't see the sin and the brokenness anymore. He sees us as we will be in our perfected state. And I think there's a beauty in claiming that, which is what your songs seem to do, is like claiming, I am not there yet, but I can recognize who God sees me as now. And that's kind of how you articulate your songs. It's interesting that you got a lot of hate for that. How did you deal with that? Because I don't, even starting this podcast, I was like, some of the comments you get from people, I was like, do they have anything else to do? Like, I'm like, they are just I guess I was so surprised. I was getting hit with these really strange, mean comments, but also just, I was like, what are these people doing all day?
Um, yeah, I think my normal tendency is to get really defeated when anybody criticizes what I do. Like, I have this fear of like, I need to maintain a certain image, and if I cause like conflict or tension or something and I'm seen in a negative light, like I spiral very quickly. But surprisingly, when Liar, the song, got a lot of hate, um, it was a weird phenomenon because there were thousands of comments just roasting the song and the theology and just, yeah, a lot of negative comments. But then I had fans go in there and they started defending me on my behalf and defending the song and going at theological debates. And I was just reading it all in third person. And I'm like, this is a very strange seat to have in this
Yeah.
situation. Um, but I think what it more fascinated me, and I thought this song has gone so viral once again, like, and there is equal love on it and equal hate. It crossed a barrier of like, I think the song is actually like very important because of the tension it's causing. And at the same
Mm.
time, I had a lot, like my team, my friends, people who were super supportive of me in the song. So I was not alone in like receiving all the hate comments. But it was fascinating and weird how many people have opinions. Yeah. I also
But
feel like, yeah.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I also feel very confident in this season in my life in a lot of ways and how I understand the Lord. There are some ways where I'm so confused and like starting from scratch. But so I felt a little not I didn't feel wavered by the comments in my own belief.
Good. Well, can you explain for people listening who know that song and maybe people who are like didn't like it, or even people who did, what was your purpose for writing it? Because it is, you're right. It's a very confident, loud, and I mean this in a good way, but it's like a confident, loud, like it reminded me of Katy Perry's um what's it called? Roar. What's her song called?
Roar. Yeah,
Yeah, where
you're
it's
gonna hear
like,
me roar.
and I have played that before when I've had like really bad anxiety or whatever because I'm just like I'm done with this. Because there wasn't like a Christian song I could pick that would like fit that feeling of like war cry, I'm done, you know?
Yes,
But
yes.
yours seemed like that's what it reminded me of except a Christian version. So I was gonna ask you like for you, why did you write it? What for you were you trying to say?
That's such a good question. And I loved hearing what became like your confidence song. To me, that tells me
Yeah.
there's a need to feel confident and to like step out and sing something that just reminds your own heart, like I am worthy and I am made in the image of Christ. And um I think that song was to meet a need that Christian music hadn't necessarily brought yet.
Hmm.
Um I also think too that we are called to speak truth over ourselves. Um
Hmm.
and not just truth of like um not this like God, I know you made me this, like you made me good and you made me beautiful and you have a purpose for me, but something that said it like you emotionally felt it. So I think the heart behind that song was to, in this like creative attitude, I'd say, um,
Hmm.
sit back in this like I know who I am. And I don't know, it's just like this one step further of confidence. I also think too, a lot of the stories I've gotten from that song are people, um, they're like, this song helped me so much with my depression, or this song helps me get out of bed every day. This song told me I maybe have reason to not end my life. Like there were stuff like that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
if this song is out there and it's any way saving a life or bringing somebody out of feeling oppressed and into freedom, then I feel like Jesus is in that. And therefore, I let the song live out in the world. And um, yeah, I would also think too, if that song were to be dishonoring the Lord, I would pray and hope that he would take it down and never let anyone hear it again. So if it keeps impacting people, then I trust he's in it.
You know, I have to say, because when I was listening to it, I mean, I was, because the mind is not redeemed. You know what I mean? Like you have to, it's like I think Christians, a lot of believers struggle with this idea, well, if I'm depressed and anxious, then something's wrong with me spiritually. And it's like, no, you're just broken and fallen. You're not like perfect. And so you're still going to face the stuff the world has, and our minds don't become different when we become saved. Like they still struggle, they're still fallen. People can still have schizophrenia, they can still have mental illnesses, they can still struggle because the mind is, even in scripture says, has to be renewed every single day.
Yeah.
And your song was literally like just telling your mind like everything you're saying is not true. I'm going to go off what the scripture says. I'm going to go off what God says about me. And so I think that's so important because it's like the mind, as you know, is so powerful. And those years you've spent where it was like controlling your life, what you would do, and depriving you of joy and enjoying life to the fullest you could. And I agree with you. I think it's a very important thing. We have to talk to our minds because our minds aren't going to do they talk very loudly on their own, but they're not going to help us out, you know?
Right. Well, in agreement with everything you're saying, the mind is teachable, it's moldable, and
Mm.
it's, I think, our responsibility to, and our like joy to get to teach and renew our mind. Um, this is more like kind of the athlete in me, but or the challenge oriented person in me. But I'm like, I can sit and hate on my mind and just say bad things towards it and be angry with it and think that it's against me. But biologically, it is the most teachable thing. Um, and if it is capable of changing and becoming new,
Mm.
and I have the ability to do that, then it is my responsibility to step forward in that. Um, Way easier said than done. I can tell you probably more often than not, I am just spiraling in a puddle of anxiety. But I think it's in those moments that if I can mindfully go, my mind is not my enemy, it is my friend. And I can even like the song Liar, I'll just turn that on. I mean, I don't do this in real life, but my songs like Liar. Turn it on and I'm just like, no, I'm gonna step into knowing who I am, knowing that my mind is for me and not against me. Like it says in Second Timothy, I have a sound mind. And I'm gonna just choose to practice that. So yeah, that's kind of that was a little abstract, but
Yeah, no, I
how
understand. So, how do you feel about the fact that like you're doing your first tour, starting your first tour, putting out your first entire album? And like it was funny because watching your video when you were 12, your voice was still very beautiful, but it's
I was actually
changed from
I
this
was
like
yeah.
shaky, it was a little shaky, right? Because you're scared. And it wasn't, but now like listening to Liar and stuff, like you're like out there, bold voice. Like there's this like change in how you're listening to it. And I was gonna say like how do you feel about that? Like how are you feeling about starting this journey of like being, I mean, obviously, well, you started singing songwriting since you were 12, but like you're starting a career now in this, and this is really exciting.
Yeah, I so that video I actually um was 22. So the song I heard first when I was 12. So it was only 3 years ago that I was singing that
Oh,
song.
wow. Okay.
I know it's hard to tell in the video. It's like super blurry. Um, but 3 years ago was that shaky, thin, vulnerable voice that was earnest,
Wow.
you know. And it's funny because after that performance, it was like it was Christmas time, so it was just early December when I sang that on stage with the orchestra. Um, and then I actually fell into like a month-long severe depression episode, um, suicidal thoughts, disassociation. It was like a very unhealthy month, very messy. And then I was slowly just through a lot of help was able to get out of that. Um, but literally after that month was when I first wrote Love Who I Am in my bedroom. And it was the first time I felt like I wrote a song that was from an earnest and imperfect place. Like, I don't have an answer. I'm actually struggling. And God, can you like, I'm gonna dump this on you and can you take it? Um,
Hmm.
I remember after I wrote that song in 2 days, I was like crying in my room because I was like, this is exactly how I feel. And I felt the Lord say, this song is for millions of people. Just hold on to it till I want you to release it. And I was like, how is this supposed to happen? I have like 2,000 followers on Instagram, like no monthly listeners, like truly, like statistically nobody. And then released it as my first single later that year, and it went viral. Everything snowballed. Um, a lot of stuff happened in that time where my career took off in some ways. And then, kind of like a couple singles later, we released Liar, and that's like Love Wham 2.0 kind of like I know my worth now. So I guess that just speaks to how much God can do in a little bit of time and how good things birth from suffering. I don't like that that's how it goes at all. But
I
it
know.
means nothing goes to waste. So Just straight up, I don't like it. There's a different way I would prefer, but
But it's the ones that when the suffering is what it's born out of, it makes the most impact on people, I think. Because it's hard to, I mean, for you, do you find it hard to sing about something you don't know or haven't experienced at all?
yeah, I usually do my best when I feel authentically connected with what I'm singing.
What do you want, like, what would be your, do you have like a dream or something you really want to be able to do in the future with this?
Oh goodness. I mean, I'm partly getting to live the dream now, which is like being a touring artist and songwriter. Um, the dream is like to see these songs continue to like change lives and impact people all over the world. I love shows, so I cannot wait for the day like um I can hear thousands and thousands of people singing these songs and making those songs their own. But a specific dream I have is my dad, he was a worship artist, and he one of like his biggest staple music things he did was Christmas arrangements, like Christmas songs, and we'd go on Christmas tour every year. Well, his dream was to put those songs to an orchestra, and then this is we love a plot twist from the Lord, but he was actually diagnosed with cancer over a year ago and then passed away last April. Um, so that was like a huge earthquake to a lot of people's faith, including mine. But my dream is to put his songs to an orchestra and include Be Born in Me, the one that I sang when I was 22, and um, bring the beauty and majesty of the Lord mixed with earnesty as well. And I'd love to record that orchestra concert live someday. So
That would be so amazing. I hope I can come to that. That'd be incredible.
I would love,
What a backstory.
yeah, that's where a lot has happened. And I usually don't like sharing stories or like making them a big embellished thing. I'm just like, this is what it is. And I just like, it always comes back to songs for me. So I want the songs to do the work, but
You know, for someone who asked you, because that is one of the hardest things. I had a close friend whose husband passed away from cancer and they had just been married for like a year and a half. No,
gosh,
I don't even know if it was that long. And I was like, it wasn't my story. And still I was like, Lord, why would you let that happen? Like these people loved you. So many people were praying for them. Why would you let that happen? And he never answered. You know, it's interesting. I've been going through Job again because I always go back to it because it's like Job says some really cutting things about God. For people listening who maybe, you know, even if you've never read the Bible before, if you read Job, Job is like really real with God to the point of just like, you hate me. You're against me. Like he says some pretty, like just shocking stuff to
he
God.
like curses the day he was born.
Yeah, he's like, I'd rather be
Like
dead. And
people say mental health is like wrong or something, and I'm like, the most devoted people following Jesus said some very rash, concerning things.
yes, exactly. And at the end of Job, God, you know, God doesn't give like an answer. He just says, I love you and you have to trust me. Like I made the universe, so I know what I'm doing. And it takes, I still struggle with that at times where I'm like, that still seems not enough. Like I want an answer. Like, why is this happening? For people who ask you, like, how did you, because some people would say, why do you still believe in God if your dad didn't live? Like, that doesn't make sense. And I've had people ask that about cancer being especially one of the biggest things people talk about is like, why didn't God heal my child? Or why didn't this happen? If God is real and good, why would he let this happen to somebody who was a nice person, whatever it was? I know that in a way, I mean, it's still fresh for you. I mean, it's like a year. I still consider that. I mean, that's still, it's not like a decade ago. But I mean, how do you answer that? Like, it's amazing that your faith is still so strong and you're holding on to it. But why, if someone's to ask you, are you doing that?
I think it's funny because when he did pass, I felt like everything I knew about God was like swiped off my desk and I was starting from scratch. I literally like tucked away my old Bible, got a brand new one. I was like, I can't even look at what once was. I think too, I didn't literally didn't read the Bible or look at a worship song or sorry, listen to a worship song. Um, Barely prayed even for 6 months after he died, which was abnormal for me because I was obsessed with scripture when he was in the hospital trying to heal him. So like I was full of faith until he took his last breath. And then I learned in therapy, like I struggled with PTSD with reading the Bible and certain worship songs, which I'm like, well, if I can't even do those basic things that are supposed to connect me with God, how am I
Mm.
actually supposed to connect with him? And then all the big questions follow that of why would God do this? How does a good God exist this way? And like, why doesn't God heal when it says in the entire New Testament about Jesus that he loves to heal? That is his heart. And he does it a bunch. And it's like so many
Mm.
whys.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who maybe asks this, my answer is I don't know. I really don't. But I've been learning that I don't know might be the safest place I can be because God is who he says he is, and he knows. And if he was good before my dad passed, then he's still good now. I think I grieved my relationship with the Lord before my dad passed. There was something really confident and faith-filled about it that I found comfort in. And
Yeah.
now my relationship with him is full of lots of discomfort. But I do believe he doesn't waste anything. And I think the discomfort is where growth and true discovery is. So at this point, I just receive this like radical acceptance of who God says He is. And if all I can do is sit and breathe, I am sitting in prayer and worship, just existing. Um, those are some of the things that to current day are how I'm experiencing following God and how I see Him.
But I think what's so beautiful about it is what you're telling me is you're actually living in faith. You're living without the feeling.
Mm,
You're living trusting, not the feeling, but what you know in scripture and you're like, I don't feel it. I don't feel like I believe it, but I'm trusting. I mean, that I think is the most beautiful place to be and such it's an encouragement to me that you get to help other people worship the Lord and you have that heart. And I hope you always have that heart because I think that's an amazing testimony to God's work in your life. So, but anyway, Allison, I'm so excited. I hope you come to my area. I was looking at the tour places and you're not coming near me yet, but I was like,
ah,
I know. You gotta come. Um, Closer to DC.
oh, we're coming to Virginia, but that's a big state. There,
Where which where in Virginia did it say?
so the city we're coming to is Culpeper. I think it's Col. I have to look. I don't know exactly where it is, but it is in Virginia. Um, so if at all is in driving distance, I'm like,
Okay, now I need to look that up again. Maybe because I saw that I was like, don't doesn't sound close, but I'll look.
that's very
Because
possible.
I would love, yeah, I really would love to see it, but I'm so grateful you're getting to do this and I cheer you on. So I'm so grateful. Thank you for taking the time for this too.
Yes, thank you for having me and for choosing to like sit in the stories because I think you do that very well. You ask very intuitive questions. Like I do a lot of these and you were like digging in the best way. And I'm like, yes, that is being present. That is, and I love the title, Lament of Hope. Such a contradiction that needs to be talked about. So,
And you're living it. So exciting and so terrible at the same time, isn't it?
it's, it's horrible, but here we are, still on 2 feet.
Well,
And
listeners, I'm gonna have a link to her website. Please check it out. You're gonna see some tour dates on there. And then as well, she has her album coming out. So keep an eye out for that at the end of the month. So, Allison, thank you again, and I can't wait to hear more of your music.
thank you so much. You are a blessing.
Thank you. Have a good day.